Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. On behalf of the Foundation for IT Sustainability, we would like to welcome you to International Green IT Awareness Week for 2012. Thank you for joining us for this very special live presentation. We're glad you could join us today. My name is Tim Martin, a project manager with the Foundation for IT Sustainability, and I'm going to give a quick overview of today's session and also walk through some basic housekeeping items. Then I'll turn it over to our featured presenter, Melissa Houghton, Marketing and Communications Specialist from Sustainability at Work, who will introduce herself and her topic and start today's session. As you may know, International Green IT Awareness Week was founded and is sponsored by the Foundation for IT Sustainability, which is a global non-profit organisation. Our mission is to reduce the negative impacts of technology on the environment and promote the sustainable use of technology to help solve environmental problems. We achieve this by educating individuals, corporations and government, promoting the implementation of green IT best practices, as well as encouraging the development of more sustainable technology alternatives. If you haven't heard of us before, please do visit us on the web at www.fits.org. As I mentioned earlier, today we have our very special guest, Melissa Houghton of Sustainability at Work, joining us to present her topic entitled Change Management Strategies to Maximise Your Green IT Solutions. Melissa will present her material, of which a copy is now available in PDF format on this session's registration page, and then we'll kick off the Q&A portion of the session. We'd ask that if you do have any questions, please submit them in the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we shall answer each of your questions at the end of the presentation. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Melissa to introduce herself and her presentation. Thanks, Melissa.
Okay, thanks, Tim. You got the... So can you see that?
There should just be a little box asking for permission to share your screen now.
Let's have a look. No, there isn't a box, Tim.
I'll just resend it. 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. Ah, there we go. Okay.
There you go. I've just resent it.
Great. I think that should... There we go. Okay, everybody. Thanks, Tim, for the introduction, and thanks to the Foundation for inviting me here today. Tim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. That's all good to go. Yep, all good.
No, I can't. Okay, great. So sorry about that. I just wanted to welcome everybody to today's session. I did want to thank the Foundation for inviting me here today and to thanks Tim for that introduction. I find change management a really interesting and fascinating area of organisational management, and hopefully today I'll be able to give you a little bit of an insight as to some practical things that you can do in your organisation when implementing IT or green IT solutions. Just a little bit about Sustainability at Work. We are a marketing, engagement and training consultancy, and our focus really is to help organisations get results by changing behaviour. Our focus is on engaging people. We believe that people are instrumental in creating greener and healthier workplaces, more productive brands and organisations. So our focus is in this sort of change management space. Today, we're going to just talk a little bit about IT and people and the importance that infrastructure change and creating successful IT solutions. A little bit about understanding culture for positive change outcomes. Talk a little bit about engagement, communication and education and why they're so key when putting in place green IT into your organisation, and then the importance of evaluating and celebrating success, which is really critical it all links back to that idea around communication. So firstly, I want to say sustainability is no longer a fad. The United Nations Global Compact study stated that 93% of CEOs believe that sustainability issues will be critical to the future success of their business. That's a huge number of organisations now embracing sustainability. We've also now got your CFOs on board, so sustainability issues and financial performance have begun to intertwine, which is a report that's come out from Ernst & Young. This is really important because once you've got your CFOs on board, you know, who are holding the purse strings, you know that this sustainability thing is now being taken very seriously. And our own research, in 2010 we conducted some research into the attitudes and behaviours towards sustainability in the workplace, and 68% of Australian workers feel that it's important or very important for their organisation to behave sustainably. So now not only do you have your senior management on board, you have your finances in place, but you've also got your workers wanting organisations to better perform in this area. And of course IT is on that front line for fantastic sustainability outcomes for businesses. We already see large and medium-sized companies adopt green IT strategies, and if they haven't adopted them yet, they are planning to, which is fabulous. And we know that that IT systems can really make some big gains in terms of productivity, in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of the way the consumables that are used. And we know that these are some of the big drivers, I guess, around the reasons why we're going down this path of green IT. According to the AIIA, in order for organisations to successfully integrate green IT products and services, it's really important to, I guess, evaluate initiatives collectively as a team. And they do have, you know, they are looking at the way that IT managers, CSR managers, operation managers and procurement managers are looking at their IT infrastructure. But really what seemed to be missing from this viewpoint is around the people and the users that are actually using green IT every day. And it's people who are making the decisions. People make procurement decisions every day. They really look at, you know, what PCs are they using, what laptops, what mobile phones, what printers, what scanners, whether or not they choose to use video conferencing, teleconferencing. And so, you know, the procurement decisions are actually being made by people. Usability decisions around, you know, basic things like what's an acceptable distance to walk to a printer and whether or not they're prepared to get off their chair to do that. You know, whether or not what sort of laptop they want to carry around and why would they switch off, you know, when it takes so long to reload are some of the excuses that we hear every day. So around usability and those decisions are being made by people. And then obviously there's the disposal decisions, and the critical question is the people making the decisions around disposal, are they intertwined with the people that are making the decisions around procurement, and how do they interlink? And these decisions are intrinsically cultural. They're embedded into the organisation, and the way that they behave in that organisation and the way that they make decisions is cultural. And so you have to have trust and collaboration and goodwill for user acceptance. And I think that's the critical thing. But change is difficult. There's lots and lots of reports that come out talking about the difficulty that companies have to embed sustainability into their organisation, and you know, there's questions around how IT projects are actually, and innovation projects are being abandoned. The success rate of IT projects is quite small. And really, this stat I found really quite interesting, that 85% of IT project failures were due to a lack of communication. And that is absolutely key to any project success is that communication and being open to that communication line. Human reaction to change is a process. There's a fabulous process curve done by Fisher, and it's Fisher's personal process of transition. It really depicts how individuals handle change. So right from the beginning, there's usually a bit of an anxiety around external threats to the company. And this change process is across any sort of change management program that you might run. It's not specific to IT changes, but there usually is some sort of external threat to the company that creates a bit of anxiety, and ideas are put forward. And when they're accepted, there's this initial I guess, blush of enthusiasm where people are really happy because something's going to actually be done about it, and that these strategies or new strategies that they'll put in place will address these threats that have come their way. But as people begin to understand what really the change might mean, and in this case it might be a sustainability, a change for better sustainability practices, they start to become quite overwhelmed, and there is this real fear of how will this change impact me. And really when they start to think about what their own self-perceptions are, their personal worldviews, their belief systems, their past behaviour, and they look to see whether or not these conflict with the new idea that the organisation is bringing in. And if that is what their reaction might be to threaten not to support the actual change, particularly if it requires profound change to their own core belief system. And so they start to go into this sort of, they threaten complete abandonment of the idea. But eventually they begin to feel a bit guilty about their past behaviour potentially. And then that sort of follows through this sort of depression or disillusionment phase where it's all driven around their values of being incompatible with the new values of the organisation when you're actually implementing the change. But this is where, in conversation with your users, you need to acknowledge that this is a reality, and look for core value compatibilities with that person, so that they can eventually accept some of the change and through dialogue progress, I guess, to moving forward. And so we also know from our own research that there's always a dip in motivation when it comes to any sustainability program, and that usually is driven around it becomes all too much and too hard. But if the organisation is committed, then they usually come out of this dip and they move towards progression. So the first steps really to change is understanding the organisational culture and behaviour, the current culture and behaviour. And this this framework, the competing values framework, is a framework that's been used for more than 20 years. And it's a device to help organisations better understand their culture and the different modes of operations. Each quadrant represents the way people in organisations process information or learn about their environment, organise, lead, participate in a team, or create value for customers. For example, in the bottom left-hand side, the control quadrant, that really looks at value-enhancing activities like improvement in efficiency by implementing better processes. This is where I see a lot of IT people. It's all about the processes, all about understanding the systems and the way that the systems can work to better enhance the value to the organisation. In the bottom right quadrant, the compete phase, that's really about being aggressive and forceful in pursuit of competitiveness. Now, this can be internal or external competitiveness, and it's all really about finding, I guess, activities or ways to communicate that is going to give them the edge. The top right quadrant, which is the create quadrant, is really about value-enhancing activities that deal with innovation. I see this around sort of new product development and new product ideas, and how, creatively an organisation can move forward. And then the fourth quadrant, which is the collaborate quadrant, really deals with activities that are about building human competencies, developing people, I guess really focusing on solidifying that organisational culture. And so this sort of idea, types of, I guess, cultures within an organisation is really important to understand, so that you can look at the approaches that you can implement when putting in a new system or process. So those departments or teams that really like that collaborative approach, it's things like your high involvement brainstorming sessions and discussion groups and employee suggestions and feedback, or trialability. This is the group that you can do pilots with and really sort of cross ideas and look for ways to improve the system for the best outcomes for that particular user. The control group, within your organisation is really looking, audits and review of policies and regulation and understand potential risk. And so the language and tone that you use and the approaches that you use with this type of group is really about addressing those sorts of issues. I sort of see them more around that sort of finance type team, or legal teams, those sorts of people. The compete, in your sort of compete quadrant, those departments or teams that look at are really driven around high competition. It's about goal setting and objectives and measurement, benchmarking against competitors, benchmarking against other teams, setting competitive means to generate ideas. And so if there's a program that you wanted to, let's just say, for example, a switch-off program in your organisation, these types of groups react very, very well to competition against floors or departments. And then in the create, which I sort of see, like I mentioned before, a little bit about the product development team. It's all about, opening up innovative platforms for new ideas, whether that's online forums or discussion groups, training programs to sort of create that or cultivate that creative thinking. So really, by understanding what sorts of cultures you've got in your organisations, you can approaches. In terms of engagement, we're a really big believer of engage early and engage often. Every department and every individual is different, and you need to consider that in your approach. Ask questions around the why and the why not. A lot of people won't give you the reason unless you ask, and a lot of the reasons are underlying, so the why not is also very important. You need to see things from their perspective, so going back to that transitional process of change, where are they on the curve? Because it's really important to address any fears or threats or happiness, and like leverage the happiness and adulation and look at where they are on that journey so you can see things from their perspective. Address barriers very, very quickly and always seek their acceptance for any solutions that you actually put in place. And that's really critical, that you get their buy-in at every stage. Make the change simple. Don't convolute it with lots of IT words and processes, and make the change very, very simple, otherwise people will not accept it. Map your communication plan to your project plan. So often do we see lots of IT project plan rollouts with no indication of the different types of communication strategies they're putting in place at each time. So you really need to allow for trial and feedback, and you really need to show that there is a process of communication through that project planning, and that will make right up front, if you can get that right up front, that will make your whole job a lot easier. Tailor your messages for more effective communication. So think about the types of groups that you've got and the types of language that you may or may not use. And really seek an expert if it's a big project. It might be a change expert, it might be a communications expert. You might already have them available in-house, or you might need to go externally. But I think that's really, really critical in order to create that success. And remember the statistic before where it said 85% of projects that have failed has been due to lack of communication, and that's something that you should be considering. In terms of effective communication, specifically for behaviour change, we talk about speaking positively in terms of relative advantage. So is it better for the company? Is it better for me? How does this work? What's the relative advantage to the individual and to the organisation? Compatibility, does it fit with who we are? Is it something that if we're a direct mail company, can we really go paperless? So does it fit with our business objectives? Complexity, does everybody understand why we're actually doing it and how we do it? And I guess that's where your communication comes in. Trialability, can we implement the project in small steps? Can we run a trial? Can we do a pilot? And observability, can we actually measure the results and modify as we learn? Some of the things to remember are around the fact that communication is a dialogue, it's two-way and it's ongoing. It never actually changes. You've got to continue with that conversation once the program's implemented and tweak and tailor every as regularly as you possibly can. Like I said, keep the message simple. So don't just keep the process simple, keep the message simple and stick to one or two main points. And think about language and tone. So don't try not to use lots of acronyms. I think about whether or not you're giving them the carrot or the stick. Are you forcing them into change, or are you trying to bring them into the change? Repetition is good. You can never say it too often. Say it often and say it the same way as much as you can. Address the key motivator for the actual individual. I was actually doing some work recently with a property developer, and we were looking at ways that their corporate services team could green their space. So it's seen delivering green buildings for quite a number of years, but culturally sustainability wasn't necessarily embedded in their whole organisation. And one of the key things that came up in some workshops that we were doing was this idea around travel and about reducing travel, and as a group they collectively believed that video conferencing was the way to go and it was really going to help them. What they didn't actually know was that they already had video conferencing facility, and they'd had video conferencing facilities for quite a while in every office around Australia and globally, but nobody knew how to use it, and nobody knew how to book it in, how to use it, how to set it up, where to go if there was a problem. So there was a general lack of communication around the infrastructure that was available, and that was due to lack of communication, and that's what it came down to. Channel selection is as important as the message itself. If you're looking at consultation, think about the way that you're consulting, whether it's workshops, brainstorming sessions, online forums, interviews, surveys, team meetings. There's a range of different channels that you can use for that process. Education, if it's an education message, then look at whether it's a one-on-one training, whether it's a small workshop group, whether it's user guides, whether it's online training or mentoring, or train the trainer. So think about it might be one or a selection of those. And then from an information dissemination perspective, it might be email, signage, newsletters, intranets, whatever things that you've got. The thing is don't assume because you've told them once or twice or even 100 times that they've heard you. You really need to be asking for feedback and track the uptake and address any issues in particular areas. And also the other thing is, don't assume because you've sent an email that they've actually read it either. In terms of dealing with issues, like I mentioned before, address any issues quickly and immediately. Find out exactly what the issue is. And remember, they might not always tell you what it is, so listen to what is not being said. Ask how they'd like the situation to be solved, and that's critical because most often they have a solution all ready to go. Or they're willing to, that opens up the conversation to have that discussion around what could actually happen. Let them talk and let them empathise and try and empathise with them, because remember, they're on that journey, and even though you might be thinking that it's such a simple change or it's such a simple solution and can't understand why they're not taking it up, there's usually a reason, and so finding out what that reason is and addressing whether it's a fear or a threat, have a look at that. Try not to get into a debate with them. Nobody is right or wrong. And if you can't deal with the issue, obviously pass it on and try and get it right the first time. And that's where the planning and identifying barriers, implementing your communication strategy with your project plan can really help with this. And then finally, just around measuring and celebrating, make sure you always go back to your objectives and see if they've been met. Do you need to get more formal feedback through a staff survey? There'll be obviously anecdotal feedback, but whether or not you need to get more formal feedback, you can also see whether or not the usage and the uptake has been undertaken, and obviously you would be addressing that as that occurs. Think about what went well and what didn't go well and what can be improved for next time. And if you've got, make sure that you've got in the plan that you're going to be measuring the behaviour change over the long term. And lastly, just tell people of the successes and communicate that success to the broader team. I think that's really important because people want to be recognised for the good work that they've actually done. And then just a final thought, I like this quote. It's about, tell me and I will forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. And I guess that's really the whole idea around change behaviour is try and involve people as much as possible. So thank you. Tim, shall I hand back over to you?
That's fine. You can retain control. Thank you very much, Melissa, for that really comprehensive and engaging presentation. It was very interesting. As Mel said, we will now commence with the Q&A portion of our live speaker session. So if you do have any questions that you would like to ask Melissa about her presentation, her work with sustainability at work, or her experiences in sustainability, then please submit your questions now in the questions box in the webinar control panel. Melissa will be able to address each question in turn, and please remember, if you'd like to speak with Melissa or a representative of the Foundation for IT Sustainability, please feel free to email us any time following the session and be more than happy to assist your query. So now for the user submitted questions. If you're ready, Mel. Okay, the first question we have for you today is, engagement is important, so how often should organisations be getting people involved? And how can they best determine who needs to be involved and who needs to be told?
Well, I mean, firstly, I think people shouldn't be told. People should be involved at all, I guess, all stages of any change behaviour or change program. I'm a big believer of engage early and engage often. And getting the right people involved at the beginning is really critical. So you really need to identify the users of the system and not just their managers. I think that's always a big mistake, is only getting their managers on. You need both. You need to get the users for the practicalities and you need the managers in there for the sort of the bigger picture ideas, I guess. But early on in the planning phase, you really should be trying to involve as many people as you possibly can that are going to be using the system on a regular basis or who are going to be impacted by the system change.
Great, thanks, Melissa. You touched on it in your presentation, but perhaps you could provide a bit of a summary around what are the most common barriers or challenges faced by organisations when trying to implement a new green IT or sustainability strategy.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, no worries. I just mentioned that you touched in your presentation a few of them, but I was wondering if you could tell us what are some of the most common barriers or challenges faced by organisations when trying to implement a new sustainability or green IT strategy.
I guess, look, some of the barriers really are around, well, first there's always a fear. There's a fear around my job becoming irrelevant, a fear about not being able to keep up with the pace of change. So you have, there's usually a bit around the fear. So communicating upfront and early and before the change is happening, and that communicating the whole journey to people will do a job of eliminating some of that fear. The big gripes that I usually hear is around the systems not working, or the system's not performing to the way that it was promised. So really the ideas around piloting and trialling and transitioning teams over gradually becomes really important, and addressing the barriers really, really quickly. There's a lot of businesses now moving to concepts around activity-based working, and of course that obviously has huge IT infrastructure reliance into that idea of activity-based working. And the minute that you have systems and IT problems is the minute that you begin to lose the support around the concept of activity-based working. So addressing the problem straight away is really important, and trialling and piloting becomes really, really important.
Great, thank you, Melissa. You mentioned early on in I'll continue on. You mentioned early in your presentation that really amazing figure that 93% of CEOs believe that sustainability issues will be critical to the future success of their business. So then maybe perhaps you can shed some light on why do so many organisations then struggle with sustainability, and particular green IT?
Why do organisations
struggle with sustainability?
Sorry, I missed.
Yeah, that's okay. Why do so many organisations struggle with sustainability, and in particular green IT, when we know that 93% of CEOs believe that it's such a critical factor?
Yeah, look, I think CEOs are very, very supportive. They know they actually need to do something about it. It's the challenge of how and what and how quickly. I think organisations struggle for a number. I know definitely in Australia there's a lot of debate around climate change and the carbon pricing system and those sorts of things that are coming into play here, and so you're getting into a political or an environmental debate rather than focusing on the business benefits of resource efficiency and building a business that actually has better processes and better systems and happier people and more productive workforces. So I think CEOs are definitely supportive. I think there's definitely a trend upwards, which is positive. I think people are grappling with the idea of how, and like I said, changing people's behaviour and changing the way that things have always been done is very, very difficult, and it's long term. You have to continue the communication and the messages and addressing the barriers, and change doesn't happen overnight. And you do see a lot of programs that you have a great shift in a particular behaviour after a particular campaign, whether that's green IT or recycling programs or whatever the program happens to be, and then it drops off again because either the program hasn't been reinforced continuously, so the idea of repetition, but it takes a long time to change people's the things that people have always done. So I guess it's important to have the senior leadership recognise the importance of sustainability, because that then will help with long-term planning, which is the beauty of organisations have the capacity to do that rather than your political teams necessarily that are on a voting cycle.
Great, thanks Melissa. The next question I have for you is a strong sustainability culture becoming a more important factor for employees when evaluating potential employers?
Sorry, Tim, can you repeat that? You're just dropping out.
Yeah, absolutely. The question was, is a strong sustainability culture becoming a more important factor for employees when evaluating potential employers?
Yes, absolutely. Employees are definitely looking for organisations that offer flexibility, work-life balance, responsible behaviour in terms of their corporate social responsibility. More and more younger recruits, if you like, are looking for organisations that they can make a difference in. And so sustainability as a concept is a really lovely way of organisations attracting good, smart people into their organisation. I think culturally, in the longer term, if we continue down this path of activity-based working or flexibility within the workforce and remote access and remote working, then organisations will begin to recruit people who have those behaviours already instilled with them. So it's working hand in hand. Definitely smart younger recruits are looking for organisations that are behaving responsibly, and in the reverse, as culture shifts and organisation shifts, they will be looking for people and human resources or human capital into their organisation that is going to be able to work within their own culture.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Perhaps you could provide us an example of a program that has worked in the past, or on the flip side, any programs that haven't worked so well.
Well, I can give you an example of a company that we're doing some work with at the moment, which is a medium-sized merchandising business. They have 50% of their staff full-time and 50% of their staff are part-time. But the really interesting thing about what they wanted to do was about 60% of their orders for their products came through via mail, traditional mail, which is quite interesting. And they sent out significant volumes of direct mail every quarter. And so what the organisation or the company wanted to do was reduce their bottom line, essentially, and look at better ways of moving their customer base, or moving their customer base to online. And their customer base is actually an older demographic, so it was quite challenging. But it was a big cultural shift for the owners, firstly, because they had to risk quite a significant portion of their revenue potentially, or it was a big risk. But the benefit gains were actually quite huge. So some of the first steps that we actually did was do some research around their customer and the way that they, read or consumed their marketing material. We looked at segmenting the data for them. We ran a trial which saw a 15% uptake of the online option, which was fabulous. But the really important thing was we had to address issues around the marketing team who were used to doing traditional direct marketing, and that was their skill set. And we also had to look at the way that the casual packing staff, the guys that were actually packing the merchandise and shipping it off, dealt with online ordering because the process was that they would print the orders, and initially it was they were getting the old orders from the mail and then packing based on that. So there was a lot of upskilling, there was a lot of consultation, workshops, training with both the marketing teams and the packaging teams to try and get them to a level where they were competent in dealing with this big change that had sort of come. So quite successful. They did get this 15% uptake of online orders, which was, in terms of scale, was quite massive for them. So, I mean, I guess really the learning is it was really about, the key thing was really about addressing the fear of the marketing team, whose job description had fundamentally changed. Communicating and promoting online was very, very different to direct mail. So that was a big change. On a program that I guess didn't work so much, it wasn't run by us, but we were called in after, but a big airline organisation. It wasn't an IT example, but it is definitely a cultural change example where they'd moved into this beautiful green office, but part of that move they had decided to centralise their waste, and they didn't tell anybody. So of course when they all moved into the new beautiful green building with only their paper waste bin by their desk, staff weren't particularly happy because they weren't told, and they started throwing in their fruit and apple cores and orange peels into the paper waste basket, which of course then was only emptied once a week, which then led to fruit flies, which then led to chemical spraying. So one little impact where they didn't communicate what really affected the individual, which was they had to get up and walk to a bin now, was a complete disaster because it kind of ruined the effect of their indoor air quality after having this chemical spray through to deal with the fruit flies.
Great, thanks so much, Melissa. Look, change management is important to organisations globally. So why do you think some countries do better than others in terms of sustainability change management? I'll just read it again. Change management is important to organisations globally. So why do you think some countries do better than others in terms of sustainability change management?
Look, I don't think it's necessarily by country so much, but by organisational culture. So there's definitely organisations that do change better than other organisations. I think generally larger organisations that have the resources and the capacity and the financial resources and also the human resources to help drive and plan change behaviour programs tend to do a little bit better. But it really does depend on it depends on leadership and the leader within that organisation, and it also depends on of the organisation to see that change embedded. But right at the beginning, I think I spoke about change programs and the success of change programs, or even IT infrastructure change programs. The key is it is very difficult, and you have to be committed to the long term. So if an organisation is committed to the long term, they will usually be quite successful. But if they're not, and they want changes to happen immediately, without the planning that is required, then they won't be successful.
Great, thanks, Mel. I guess leading on from that is, how does a successful change program differ between small and large organisations? Does each require a unique approach to maximise success?
Does each require
a different approach? Does each require a unique approach to help maximise success?
I'm missing the middle word before approach. What sort of approach?
A unique approach.
Oh, a unique. No, I think it's a process. So I think if you can get the right people in the right room at the right time, up front and in the beginning, I think you need to address all of the potential issues, just like any standard project planning, but with a sustainability eye on it and a people eye on it. Put your people glasses on and think about what impact would this have on this particular group of people or this person if this was to change, and try and think up front about all of the barriers that you're going to face so you can address them. And I don't think that's unique. I think then in the I guess the consultation phase, you can work on any of those challenges and barriers before any implementation. You need to get buy-in at that stage, and I think constant communication along the journey is really, really important. Make sure you keep people up to date with the changes, any delays that are happening, any things that are being pushed forward early need to be communicated. I think then in your if you look at it, if you are doing a pilot or a trial, which I do highly recommend, then you can look at the ways that you can measure or make sure that you measure the success, because you're going to use commentary and numbers and all those sorts of measures that you've put in place for your communication for the broader. Do definitely react better to communication pieces where they feel like everybody else is involved. So messages like 60% or 70% of staff who trialled our new software package said that it was quicker, more efficient and easier to use is a very strong message, because then people then think, oh, right, okay, well, my peers really have embraced it, and perhaps it's not so scary after all. So I think there's definitely that the way that you run your pilot and use your measurements and outcomes from that pilot in your communication for your broader rollout. And then it really is about thinking about how you roll it out and whether or not it's a staged approach, so that you can address departmental issues and challenges, or whether you roll it out in one go. And that will really help determine your communication and your education strategy and your engagement strategy. And then at the end, that constant monitoring and tweaking. So it's not a unique approach, but what is unique is that you need to understand the actual culture within that organisation. So you're then tweaking your communication to meet those cultural demands.
Great, thank you, Mel. Just a notice to the audience, this live Q&A session will be coming to a close shortly, so please do submit any remaining questions now, and we'll have Melissa address those in turn. You mentioned earlier on in your presentation, Mel, about the issue of corporate negativity and fatigue. So what are some strategies you could recommend to our audience to help them overcome sustainability fatigue or skepticism within their organisation?
Yeah, I think, and again, it comes down to planning. I think if you can, if you recognise that at some point you're going to go through some sort of motivational dip, I think you can actually plan for that. I think addressing and the dips will come and go depending on the department and where in the change process they are. But you can apply, I guess, different campaign techniques, different messaging techniques to your communications. Sometimes it's okay to give people a bit of a break. It doesn't have to be all go, go, go without sort of your peaks and troughs yourselves in terms of your program rollout. I think you've got to give time for people to absorb, new change before you transition them into something else. So having, if there's a number of different initiatives that you're going to implement over 12 months, make sure that they're not sort of all in 1 month where there's just so much change people can't cope with. Even if they are connected to a certain extent, it sometimes can be good just to give people a bit of a break, a bit of time to accept and to learn the new process or the new system or whatever it happens to be before the next big thing. So I guess that's the key, is you need to be able to consult with the different departments. You'll start to get a feel. If you open up that dialogue, you'll start to get a feel of when people are starting to become a lot of change, and you then need to take that on board and readdress your program rollout potentially. But I think it's about open dialogue and having the conversations with the different departments or teams or individuals about where they are in their change journey. And I think that will do a lot to alleviate massive dips. You'll still get dips, but and you'll be able to pull them out a lot quicker because you've listened to them.
Thank you, Melissa. Final question for today. If there was one thing that you'd want our audience members to take away from your presentation today, what would that be?
What's the number one thing I want the audience to take away?
Yes, correct.
I guess it would be definitely open dialogue and continuous dialogue. You won't know what people are thinking or feeling, and they won't necessarily tell you. But if you open up that dialogue and have the conversation and look at things that they're not telling you, and probe and question and ask why and why not, then I think you're a long way in really creating some great successes for your IT rollouts.
Fantastic. Well, that does end our webinar session for today. So thank you very much to our speaker, Melissa Houghton from Sustainability at Work, particularly for your time and willingness to share your information and your experiences with us. It's been fantastic and a privilege to have you along. We also certainly appreciate your time for coming along to today's session. I just want to say a big thank you also to those who have attended and participated in today's session. We're certainly glad you could join us, and we hope the session has been helpful for you. Just a reminder that a recording of this session will be made available within 24 hours via the Green IT Week conference registration page, the one you used to access today's session. Did you have any closing comments or remarks, Melissa?
No, I'd just like to say thanks, Tim, for hosting today's session. I think it's been a fabulous conference, and I hope the participants have learnt some great information over the course of the last week.
Well, thank you again. As I said, we really appreciate your time, and it's been an absolute privilege having you along for this year's session. So with that, I will conclude our session for today. So I thank you all again, and I certainly hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Please take care.